Hello and welcome, fellow B2B marketers. Welcome to my Sydney here in Sydney on this beautiful Thursday, but in lockdown. A very, very warm welcome to the second Abm Leaders Forum Virtual APAC. I'm Emma Roborg and the founder of the B2B Marketing Leaders Forum, which is APAC's largest community and network for B2B marketers. And we normally have in-person events held yearly in Melbourne, Sydney, and Singapore. And I want to thank you all for joining us today. I am so excited because ABM is finally gaining a huge momentum here in APAC. At our October event last year, we had our first virtual ABM forum, and we had 430 registrations. And today we have over 550 signed up, and our phone has been calling all morning trying to register last minute. And so that's been really, really cool. And just keeping in mind, it's not a free event. So thank you all for joining us today. And what we're going to talk about, I'm really, really personally passionate and really, really excited about, which is account-based marketing. And ABM, when we first covered it in 2017 at our Sydney event, it was really not that popular. Like, we had 20 people attend that session. And back then, if I look at myself, we're constantly as B2B marketers, with so many trends and tactics and channels and strategies to keep up with. And I just think we haven't been really ready until right now to take this on. So ABM has had a huge uptake in the US and UK over the last couple of years. I attended UK's largest B2B marketing event in London in 2019. And everything they talked about then was ABM. So if you're B2B marketing in IT tech, you might have done this, or especially if you have UK or US headquarters, you might have done ABM for a while. But we're seeing a really big uptake now, even in more traditional industries like manufacturing, banking, and professional services are starting to adopt it, which is really exciting. So before I head over to our first keynote today, just a big shout out to our sponsors and partners that are making this virtual forum possible. We have On24, which is the platform that's delivering this forum today, and Just Global, Adobe, Selling Simplified, Green Hat, LinkedIn Marketing Solutions, The Marketing Practice, and Agent 3. And I really strongly recommend you that in the coffee breaks, you go and check down their booths and their spaces, because there's a lot of ebooks and guides and practical information there to have a look at. But before we get started in our first session, I just want to give you a quick demo of the dashboard you're looking at right now. This is the On24 platform, and you can not crash this. This is completely customizable to you. So what you're looking at, all the different windows, you can open or move them around, you can drag them, make the screen bigger, make the PowerPoint slides bigger, whatever you want. You can't crash it. It's personal to you. I just want to point down the bottom at your screen, you have all these buttons. So please, you can just play around with them and open and close them too, and especially focus on the Q&A one. Every session now is live, so you can make sure you type in your questions, and don't leave with your questions to the last minute either. Okay, so finally, before we hand over to the last speaker, I just want to take you through the format of today's sessions, and I'm not going to go through the definition of ABM as such, but for those of you that are new to ABM, so after having spoken with like hundreds of ABMers and CMOs over the past few years, I just like to group the term IBM into kind of two definitions or camps. So the strategic ABM camp or group, that's the people that work with ABM that has ABM usually in the job title. So if you look at today's speakers from Accenture, ServiceNow, and Salesforce, and ITSMA, then we're talking about ABM, which is strategic, which is like you go deep down into a big account, usually like 1 or 5, like huge big accounts, go deep into them. And when we talk about ABM at scales, we're talking about targeting anything from like 100 to 1,000, and someone even mentioned that they were targeting 40,000. And there you're talking about using technology and data so that you're able to listen out for intent signals. And for those that are new to that, just quickly, if you think you're a software vendor selling cybersecurity to banks, you can listen out for, if you target those banks, you can listen out for intent signals coming from those banks. Let's say someone Google searches cybersecurity, or they download a white paper, or they read an article, or they go to a webinar, all of that, that is, if that's coming from one of your targeting accounts, you're listening out for that intent, and that tells you need to go after that account. So that is a brief overview. So today's program then, the first 6 sessions today will be focusing very much on this scale part, technology and data. And the last 3 sessions today, we're going into the strategic part of ABM. So please stay with us for the whole day. And with that, I'd like to give a very warm welcome to James O'Flaherty, Managing Director APAC at agency Just Global. And with that, James is live from the UK. It's 2 a.m. at night. And I allowed him to move back from Sydney to be with his family in the UK on the one condition that he did this session live. So 2 a.m. at night, he hasn't been to bed yet. So a massive applause and welcome to James. Welcome.
Thanks, Emma. Thank you very much, everyone. I'm hoping my family don't wake up. So if there's any children disturbing me at 2 a.m., it's never a good thing, I promise. Thank you very much for the introduction and for the comprehensive description of what ABM constitutes. And I think that captures a lot of the information that you'll be hearing today. Hopefully we can add some additional value and insight into that as well. We presented at the event last year, and the thing that we found that was the appetite for information was huge. So I hope we can kick things off in a good way this morning. As a quick intro to us, I am the MD for the APAC region of Just Global. We're a global B2B marketing agency. We've been operating in the region since 2018. Our offices are in Singapore and in Sydney. We work with a range of B2B brands across brand, demand generation and ABM, with our ABM activities generating hundreds of millions of dollars of pipeline for our clients in the past 3 years. As you can tell, and as Emma has said, I'm not in Sydney. I moved back to the UK last month. It wasn't just because of the football, and I said I wasn't going to mention the football, but I've talked about the football 3 times now in the first minute. So I've moved back here to lead our new global strategic solutions team. So we provide global ABM services primarily, with our Centre of Excellence defining ABM activities across a range of areas, from readiness assessments through to one-to-one, one-to-few, one-to-many programs, all with a range of KPIs, but most commonly account expansion into existing accounts. So last year we talked mainly about one-to-many and how that could act as a gateway to more strategic ABM. This year we want to talk more about less about the practical and more of the theory. Today we hope to be able to give you some insights based on our experiences of how you can scale ABM, but also how ABM can act as a driver for change within a business. So let's get going. There's a few things that we're going to be covering today. One of the most common knowledge gaps of any B2B marketers that we work with is how to scale their ABM programs. That's because even with a solid framework and process in place, brands need to leave space for true personalization. And that requires more than adapting a message. It means strategic changes to tactics, to creative, even the duration or the language that we're using. How can marketers get smarter, move faster, and deliver ABM results at scale? And that's really where we try to come in. So we also look at the importance of leaving room in anything we do for really human experiences. And I understand that as an agency and as B2B marketers, we hear this a lot. We'll try to give some context to what that actually means today. And also to kind of explain that the understanding that it's not true that all great ABM projects can be easily measured. And that's one of the difficulties that confronts many of the brands that we work with. Finally, how ABM can affect real organizational change in a business by creating a common purpose. And that's something many of the companies running ABM think they can address with vision and mission statements. But it's only when you really get the hands-on practical experience of a team working together where they can really feel relevant in the teams, where they genuinely believe that they're all in it together for a good outcome. So that's one of those kinds of intangible benefits of ABM that I think we've all experienced as marketers in the last few years as it's become more and more of a thing, is that just that ability to work on a very strategic level and to be able to influence business decisions on a much wider level than purely on a marketing campaign. I thought it was relevant to bring this up. So when we did the presentation in October of last year, we canvassed the opinion of our clients late in 2020. And it gave us a really good snapshot. And I think many of the challenges that were articulated then still retain a significant level of relevance today. However, there is more of a mainstream of ABM, even in this last 8 or 9 months. And it's led to less of a battle for budget and more of a focus on how to ensure you really get the value and the measurable success out of ABM. And then from that, one of the common requests that we get is how to scale programs out. So where a one-to-few program may exist, how we can then focus on single accounts in more depth. Or conversely, where a one-to-one program is run, how we can take any of the insights and the processes and frameworks that we've worked through and take those frameworks and run them into a larger piece, whether that's more one-to-one or a one-to-few program, or even going into the one-to-many. So, as I say, we're continually asked to look at these pilots and then see how we can roll them out into the wider programs. We'll start with the wider programs such as vertical activities and then how they can be refined into one-to-one. And it's really important. If you can make this change up or down, then you can run ABM faster, smarter, and with the processes that allow you to scale. However, as with so much in marketing, we often get trapped in a situation where just because you can do something doesn't mean that you really should. So without that personal touch, ABM often almost becomes an enhanced version of demand generation. And this is where the human, the creative, and the highly tailored approach needs process, but only as much that it allows for truly engaging experiences. At heart, we're still a creative agency. We weigh the value of what we do in terms of the behaviors we can change through marketing. And that only happens through great insights that can be converted into convincing, attention-grabbing activities that challenge a brand's perception of its partners as well as even its own strategy for success. You need to think about a roadmap towards this approach, ensuring where you get to is achievable, with milestones designed to show you progress, even when it doesn't feel like it. And on a higher or a broader level, we know how much of an impact COVID has had on all of us, and we can use ABM to bring people under a united objective. ABM really can have a genuinely profound impact on the success of your business and how you all work together. And that's something that we found in the past 12 months has really helped us in terms of articulating the value that we can provide. So going back slightly to the creative piece, this is where the link between greater personalisation and ways to properly activate that personalisation come into play. We've got a couple of stats or quotes on the page here, and I think they're both relevant for different reasons. Right now, brand is driving demand to a greater degree than we've seen for years in B2B. The understanding of the importance of a brand platform that differentiates needs to then overlay very specific ABM programs, and it's bringing that very much to the fore. And it's made clear in these two things that we wanted to pull out. First of all, it's important that the right sort of personalisation is used. And secondly, how creative thinking and deployment of key messages will need to be looked at in unison. So recent Gartner research shows that personalisation creates better results. And that's true in demand generation as it is in ABM. But what's also interesting is the wrong kind of personalisation and the impact that can have. And the impact that can have from a demand generation perspective is big. But from an ABM perspective, if you're targeting your existing accounts and you're looking to expand, the wrong kind of personalisation has the potential to rather than expand those accounts, for you to actually lose business. So it's a really big part of what we look at in terms of evaluating what the right kind of personalisation actually looks like. And then on the other side of it, Binet and Field are a regular source of statistics in this context. And the quote from Peter Field has never been more relevant than today. We have to continue to market as humans to humans. And I realise we hear that sort of thing a lot, and it can often feel like it's just words, but we really need to not let the powerful tech platforms available to us cost us away from our customers. We need to make sure that we maintain that contact with the people buying our businesses in order to really effectively market to them. So when we look to incorporate this into ABM, clearly frameworks are vital. So long as they're allowing enough freedom to adapt to the account or the vertical being targeted. Our own framework, and I'm not going to go through this in a great deal of detail, but I just want to kind of put it up there as an example. It's very similar to a number of the other brands that will probably be displaying what they've got today. And it really depends, as all of the good frameworks do, on getting the relevant insights and then being able to work through stages of development for getting to market as efficiently and effectively as is possible. So once we've done that, we can then align the insight to the account, produce go-to-market plans that fit the objectives, the people, and the most impactful ways of running these messages into our key buying units and decision makers. And we can also look closely at what already exists, from content through to value propositions and brand campaigns in market, ensuring, first of all, the brand experience is consistent, even if it's specific to a particular message we're looking to reinforce, but also because we understand from all of the experience that we've gathered in the past 3-4 years in the APAC region, it's true everywhere, but it's particularly true in Asia Pacific, that budgets continue to be a problem. Budgets for what you want to do versus budgets for what you can do are often not the same. So we need to be able to work smart and use as much of what exists as possible. And then from there, execution, optimization, and feedback loops that allow for constant iteration of what we do to form the basis of any sound ABM program. And just as an aside, and I hope this isn't too presumptuous of me, everyone has their own version of an ABM framework. Some we would feel are slightly wrong, and I can address where we think they're wrong in the Q&A, but most are fundamentally right. And the most important thing to have is people who can guide you, who've done it before, whatever their plan. And it's vital that when it comes to scaling, you have a roadmap that covers the key things. And it's just remembering the marketing fundamentals: product, price, people, promotion. These remain key points, start points for any program. And then it's aligned to KPIs that everyone buys into. And I think one thing that is always a kind of an area that we look to talk about and focus on when we talk to our clients and when we talk to the wider market about ABM, there's a lot of confusion in the market in terms of the terminology, the phraseology, the frameworks, the processes. And I think the most important thing is to, rather than buy one single process, is to find the people and the frameworks that work for your business, and then to build the expertise around it to make sure that you can actually scale that. But how do you ensure a smooth expansion of your ABM? There's often what we would describe as tactical evolutions. One of the sales team has seen what you've done, wants to replicate it for their accounts, or there's suddenly an imperative in the business for quarterly targets to be hit and gaining traction in particular accounts or verticals. And that can be hard to deploy correctly because there's no plan behind it. There's lots of ways of scaling ABM as well, and starting with one account and then taking a broader vertical approach, so one to few to one to many potentially, or ensuring you develop the right framework from the start, and I'll obviously cover a little bit of that, to enable you to benefit from economies of scale. So if we talked about the technology, there's all kinds of tools out there, and there's things like Path Factory and Demand-Based that enables you to personalize at scale, which is great, and it ultimately will come down to having the right team with experience to move into scaling ABM. But the best way is always to have a roadmap. And I think this slide is extremely good at showing what that might look like. So an ABM Readiness Audit, whether you think of your business as mature or not, is always a good activity, as it will uncover holes in your processes, looks at resourcing or alignment outside of the sales and marketing organization, and help you to define the right way of proceeding. And with a roadmap like the one that we've got on the screen at the moment, you can work through phases that provide clarity to the business on when new programs will come online and why these programs are the right ones for the business. So in the first phase, which is at the bottom quadrant of this, it's all about understanding where your opportunity lies, how you stack your priorities, and then what you have or what you need to be able to be effective. For content, it's all about using what you can and identifying gaps that will solve multiple issues. Then for tech, it's ensuring that you've got the right technology to address issues you define as critical in the process of this period. One of the things that we do find is that technology is often acquired rather than strategically purchased. And a number of organizations are then trapped in a place where they're trying to make technology fit a plan rather than having the technology that backs up the strategy that's been put in place. Then it's a case of having a process that works for you and your teams. So phase one also has to be all about the data. What do you have? What do you need? Where can you get it? And in phase two, we start to go deeper. We define the account level or the vertical level for something like a one-to-few program, the insights there, creating a baseline plan for any activations, and then working on the content, training the team, implementing the tech, agreeing SLAs internally, processes for reporting and measurement. And then in phase 3, it's about expansion. And this is where the scaling of the ABM happens at its best, because you've got that solid groundwork done, you've got the experience, you've got people familiar with those processes, and it's not something that you continually do on the fly. As much as possible needs to be defined as early as possible. It gets that buy-in from across the business, and it gives you the chance to get it right. So by defining the stages you work through, then creating frameworks, you can go faster with processes, deliverables, measurement at scale. In this example, a one-to-many program is really a big targeted media program. And I think Emma spoke in the introduction about the example of some of the one-to-many programs that are out there, where businesses come to us and say they have 40,000 accounts to target. We can call it ABM if that's what's going to make them happy, but it's a demand generation program. And I think where we kind of come into a slight kind of conflict, and one-to-many is always the kind of the less fragrant end of ABM, I guess, is a nice way to put it, is what that actually constitutes. And really here, what we're looking at is where we have the tech to be able to do personalization at scale, light touch personalization, then we'll implement it into these types of activations. And you can see the kinds of things that would be done in that instance. As a further example, you start to move then down into something like one to few. In this example, we move through to a more strategic account program. You can call it strategy light if you like. You can see how various activities become as standard without ever becoming formulaic. It's really important you give yourself the room to be able to tailor more than a message. And this is also where we begin to look much more closely at orchestration of efforts with sales, and often use frameworks such as these to build confidence, relationships with sales that can then lead into more specific one-to-one plays that can give you much greater depth. And at this stage, insights on individuals become paramount, and the work done with data teams on both client and agency side lead us to activations that drive real human experiences. And there's examples that we can point to in this. And again, what I haven't done today is put lots and lots of client examples on here, because I want to talk more about the kind of the theory and the ways that we can approach it. But just as an example of the kind of the way we can collect data that really informs us on a human level, some of the tools that we use provide things like personality readouts of key individuals in target accounts. And that's based on scraping data from all of their digital profiles. And being able to take that information and then start to relay that into the projects that we're running. So you start to actually talk to people in language we know that there's going to be empathetic to how they approach their day. And that's obviously a really important element of personalization. Personalization isn't just, I am a buyer, this is my problem, and this is the business I work with. Personalization is also dependent on empathizing with them and actually being in the right channels dependent on what we see from, for example, content consumption across their different buyer journey. And at this stage that we want to change tack a little. So much of the conversation around ABM today revolves around tactics, tech, and tracking. 3 T's that can often feel like the defining principles of an off-the-shelf approach to ABM. But we want to go back to the comments earlier in the presentation from Burnett and Field around the effectiveness of excellent creative. Excellent creative is only effective if you really understand the individual and you can emote to them, that you can actually reach them in a way that is going to make them stop and listen. And that's something slightly different to some of the things that we see in the market, and being honest, in the past, where we were still learning as we were going 5-6 years ago, where we would try to do ABM at scale and you put prescriptive, it will be a landing page, 3 emails, 4 social tiles, that type of approach, which has its merits, but needs to be built out to be very specific to the people that we're looking to target. And in that context, we as marketers often talk about buyer journeys. Gartner produced a brilliant piece around 18 months ago around the lack of a linear buyer journey. We all know the statistics: 7 people average in a buying unit, 5 content engagements before wanting a conversation, all those sorts of things that inform how we can create marketing programs of all types to cater for what on paper looks like a chaotic user journey. But the problem with focusing on this is we often get away from what the actual experience is and how we make it relevant to the buyer. And I think this is where, with ABM, the opportunity when you are looking, first of all, to implement it, but then to scale it, the opportunity to have a real piece of creative freedom in the way that you can approach addressing these audiences. So we want to overlay user journeys with persona mapping, obviously, but personas are a vital part of getting ABM off the ground and being able to scale ABM. But when we get to a strategic ABM play, we need to think much more about a human being than a buyer. How do we motivate change in their behavior? How do we as ABM practitioners work in a way that creates the culture internally to really work in unison and make a cultural shift that enables ABM to perform as we want it to? And that's a really important piece. And when we talk about the unmeasurable benefit of ABM, the ability to tie various people, various parts of your organization together under a strategic objective is, from our experience, immeasurably valuable to a business. And it helps to change the culture. And that's something that I think ABM as an enabler is really, really important to businesses like yours, because that's where you can get extra value from it. As a note, I've obviously taken too much of myself in this slide, so I did try to make it look like I'm a normal human being by making the football image smaller, but obviously that would probably be bigger than the family, the wellness, or the personal development images on here. As a note, if anyone's ever targeting me on a one-to-one basis, make that football picture bigger. But the main point in the context of ABM is that where we trap ourselves purely measuring the measurable data, we can't see the wider impact we could have on change internally and also in the client's mind. Their perception of our business as aligning with their own, and even challenging their perception of where they need to take their business. And in terms of, to give that a little bit of extra context, we often talk about fit when we're looking at how do we evaluate what the right type of business that we work with is. And fit is quite an ephemeral term, but fit and culture go together so closely. And I think we've all, from experiences in our past, we all know what it's like when we're working with businesses that don't align with our own. And we can be as sophisticated in the targeting and as clever in the messaging and as creative in the positioning as we want to be. But if that fundamental thing isn't in place, if we can't feel like those two businesses can fit together, there's going to be a problem that is eventually going to result in a disconnect. So I told you I was changing tack a little bit. Many of you will be familiar with the name Carl Jung. So Jung was a Swiss psychiatrist, and he was a real pioneer. One of his theories was around something he described as synchronicity, which I'm sure a lot of you would have come across in the past. His definition of this was to describe circumstances that appear meaningfully related, yet lack a causal connection. The England football team up until this year comes to mind for me right now on that one. Jung held that to add meaning to certain, or to all intents and purposes, coincidences can be a healthy function of the human mind, principally by way of bringing important information of the unconscious and actually making it something that enables us to make more creative and strategically led decisions in terms of resolving a problem. So why do I put this on the screen? Well, we've been working in ABM enough time to know that although you can measure a lot, some things remain out of reach. These are the almost unquantifiable elements. How do we measure changing mindset in target accounts? Increased engagement with content may tell us something of this, but it doesn't describe the changed perception of our brand within those businesses that we're targeting. Remember that we're none of us unique at this point in time. There is a lot of ABM going on, and a lot of the companies that we work with are targeting a lot of the companies that they're targeting in different accounts. So a lot of the same businesses are being targeted in this way. And we need to be able to challenge an entire business and its perception of our brand. We almost need to challenge its working model. And it's a long, drawn-out affair. When you need to change the way your account thinks, or it could happen in a rush. The key is to be a team focused on strategic objectives, something that leads us to a much bigger thought around ABM. And in this context, we believe ABM can be a much grander change agent within businesses like yours. And this is almost a re-articulation of where the benefits of ABM can be found. ABM is the art of strategic business objectives come to life. Giving everyone a unified purpose behind these objectives can affect cultural change to your business. This can have an effect of acquiring your target accounts through an increasingly obvious fit, and I'm coming back to that now, that may either not have existed previously or become apparent to both sides through a period of understanding more about how your business needs to position, but also it's not just positioning, how your business has to work. And this is where the motivation needed to maintain large ABM programs can be helped by outside-the-box approaches, such as enhanced personalization of tactics, media, time and place of delivery, or even that person delivering the message. And this is where the thought of synchronicity comes back, where these seemingly unconnected events become an account narrative, because all the signs that we're working with point to it. It's exactly how ABM can provide those intangible internal benefits that translate to increased sales. So I realize that's like probably not the kind of 11 o'clock on a Thursday morning thing that most people will be talking about when it comes to ABM. But I think it's a real agent for change. And as marketers, we should grasp this opportunity to be able to be at the forefront of that. As an example of where it doesn't work, so the flip side of this. Now, from our experience, we work with lots of businesses and we tend to have very positive experiences. But occasionally there are businesses that we have challenges with. I'm going to talk about one of our clients from the past. I'm going to call them Business T, because I think that's probably my safest way of avoiding too many black eyes after this. So we struggled working with each other for more than a year on ABM programs. And the issue that we felt was that the main problem they had was where they couldn't see measurable ROI in the immediate to short term. This then created a lack of belief from marketing in what we were doing. And as a knock-on effect, sales didn't believe marketing were aligned. And in a short period of time, the internal culture broke the whole effort. And ABM has a bad impact on the entire business operation, where misalignment becomes increasingly felt as a real failure of the organization. And I think it's not to kind of scare, but I think it's an important part of this is how we can actually do ABM effectively, is to understand that these are some of the things that we can have as issues. Which takes us back to synchronicity. So we mustn't think of ABM as a straight-lined optimization tool to be able to drive results. We need to cater to long-term motions that require subtle but continual changes to how your mark perceives a perceived break with past norms. That doesn't just mean for your client. Your team needs to feel that for their own activities, that they're creating a cause and effect linked to them thinking more strategically. ABM is the enabler of that. And it puts us in a position where we can really affect change on a level that we probably wouldn't have perceived possible. So look, I thought I would just try and summarize this because I realize I've gone in quite a lot of different directions. But fundamentally, planning remains the key to scaling ABM effectively. And in order to have a real good plan, you need a framework. And for that framework, you need to have done a roadmap to show where you're trying to get to with ABM. From a tactical perspective, personalization. You can use a framework that allows for a different creative approach as you can scale to fit the larger accounts. And then on that kind of more intangible level, ABM creates deeper engagement within the business, and you can take that opportunity to align and accelerate your cultural change. And that is me. So hopefully some of that made sense, and hopefully I haven't got too many questions that I'm going to struggle to answer.
Thanks so much, James. You know, we have over 300 people here live on this session, and for those that have joined us lately, James is live 2 a.m. in UK, and most of the questions in the beginning came about this, the football. Of course, England won against Denmark, and you've been up ever since. So, okay, so but we do have quite a few questions, and a lot. I don't know how I can keep up with all of this. Okay, we're gonna go through. Okay, first, before we're not gonna get through all of them, but what I'm just gonna say is James gonna answer all these questions separately. He'll connect with each of you individually if we don't get through them, and reach out. And then you can also reach out with James and to connect with him here and also on LinkedIn. Yes, we will have the slides. Everything will be available and for this. Okay, so I'm just going to go with this one. Oh, they keep coming. I can't even stop. Okay, this is I think this was the first question came in when you talked about change. Keen to see how ABM acts as a business change agent, as this is the most important aspect for the success of ABM. I don't know if you cover that in depth. And we just do really quick, short answers because we have like 2 minutes to go.
Okay. Yes, because if everybody is behind the same strategic goal, everybody by default becomes a strategic player in their business. And I think as soon as you see that kind of that motion of everybody traveling in the same direction, there's a massive change in the way that the operation actually functions. I think it is a cultural change that it's effective as long as you can do it the right way. And where you're doing road mapping and frameworking, involving all of the people across the business that are going to have some kind of level of input or stakeholder management just means that everybody gets buy-in from that from day one.
Okay, great. What kind of milestones would you recommend we measure to keep the business happy?
Well, in terms of if I go back to that roadmap slide, you put timelines on those roadmaps and you make sure that you're getting to the end of phase 1 at the end of Q1 or Q2 or whatever it is that you're defining. That's the easiest, surest way of doing it. And obviously project management becomes a big thing because there are lots of moving parts with these types of activities. So just ensuring that you've got people going at the right speed, working off of that roadmap, that's the best and easiest way to be able to track whether or not you're on the right road.
Great. What are some examples of bad personalization that you have seen that have had a negative impact?
I mean, most of the emails that I get are a bad example of personalization. But I think that we've seen in the past where, okay, so everything about ABM really depends on two things, data and insights. And they're obviously two very interlinked elements. Where the insights are incorrect, then you can see basically the wrong value proposition. And if you're wrong on the value proposition, when the message is hit, then everything goes wrong. And where I've seen it not work particularly well in the past is where that personalization is tied to the wrong message. And I've seen that in numerous instances because we're not putting the value in the time that it takes to create those really deep insights to be able to then get the right results out the back of a program.
Great. I just got 12 new questions here, and I have about 15 here already. 10-second answer, and then we'll answer all the questions after this, and we can keep asking the other speakers throughout the day. So like I've said, we're going to say the first 6 sessions today are very much about the scale part of ABM, and the last 3 sessions a bit about the strategic part. Hey, James, at which point should sales team start engage and share the insight and work together with account-based marketing process?
At the start, like right up front, because the objectives have to be sales and marketing objectives.
Yeah, perfect. We're gonna finish, and everybody, I'm gonna meet you in the next session now. So everybody, big thank you to James. And next, we're going over to the next session. So just click that button that says next session, close this browser, and you'll have a new one, and I'll see you there. Thank you so much, James.
Thank you.